Welcome to today's webinar, The Art of Effective Communication, Building Strong Relationships with Upper Management, presented by Kathy Bain. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. MiTraining would like to acknowledge that we are hosting this live webinar from the lands of the Jagera people. We also acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today, and especially those joining this webinar. Hi everyone, my name is Stacey and I'm the General Manager of MiTraining. MiTraining is a dynamic, future-focused registered training organisation that empowers individuals and workplaces to meet the challenges of an ever-changing work landscape. We are leaders in enhancing workplace mental health and organisational well-being. Our focus is on enabling individuals and leaders to thrive within their organisational context by developing emotional intelligence, career development strategies, and workplace psychological safety. Meet Kathy. Kathy has over 25 years' experience in people development, specialising in the growth of leaders and teams through focused development and coaching. She employs transformational coaching to enhance clients' awareness, confidence, and capability, supporting them in understanding their purpose, goals, and strengths for higher levels of personal and professional achievement. Known for her energetic and authentic style, Kathy respectfully challenges clients to grow outside their comfort zones and reach their goals. She works on behaviours, leadership capabilities, organisational challenges, and overall skills, helping clients develop their knowledge and abilities to achieve results and increase leadership effectiveness. Kathy's broad industry experience spans mining, government, energy, finance, aerospace, health, legal environments, and higher education. I'd like to warmly welcome Kathy to the microphone.
Hello, everyone. Let me bring up my camera, get myself all ready. I'll be right there with you. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming today. Maybe it's your lunch break, so I applaud you for taking time out for you today. I know we're not here to talk about the weather, but if you're in Brisbane like I am, it's a pretty chilly day today, so I hope you're keeping toasty and warm. My accent may fool you. So I come from Canada originally, and I've been in Australia for half of my life now. So most of my adult life has been here. And as Stacey said, I've had the pleasure of having a very vast career here. I started out in human resources and then I went into learning and development. I worked in quite a few different organizations with different people, different leaders, different executives. And then a few years ago, I branched out on my own. And so now I do coaching and leadership development. That's my focus, as well as communication skills. So I'm actually very excited and thrilled to be sharing some of my tips with you today. On a personal note, I have a husband who tagged along with me from Toronto. I couldn't shake him off. And that's okay. 30 years together, he's a pretty good guy. I have three wonderful godchildren here in Brisbane that I spend a lot of time with. And I'm the kind of person that loves to be outside, loves to be in nature, just not on a chilly day like today. And I need to share this little story with you. It might make you chuckle. Um, you know, I'm not complaining. It's 15 degrees here today. Yes, we feel a little chilly, but when I was growing up, it was the days where kids walked to school. It would be minus 30 degrees, and I would be walking to school. And it's 15 degrees today. So I've definitely acclimatized, but I just go, wow, we really need to be grateful for the circumstances we're in. So, welcome.
Thank you, Kathy. That was a wonderful introduction and lovely to hear a little bit about yourself. and walking to school in -30. That's
Ah,
amazing.
crazy.
So, today, if you've joined our webinars before, you might have noticed a little bit of a difference in that I, Stacey, am actually visible to you today. I'm on camera. And that's because we've decided to do a little bit of a different structure to our webinar. Today's webinar is going to be a podcast style between Kathy and I. I'm going to facilitate it and be directing questions to Kathy. We would like this to be as interactive as possible. So throughout the session, we are going to pause and ask for you to reflect and to write any comments or questions that you have in the Q&A box. We've opened that up for you today. You can write it in response to Kathy's questions, or you can write comments at any time as we progress throughout today. I'll be checking in and seeing what those comments are, and then directing them to Kathy. So we do have a lot of people registered today for the webinar. So we're looking forward to getting going. And to start us off, Kathy, I'd like you to share if there is actually a difference in communicating with a supervisor or a manager versus a senior leader.
Yeah, it's a great question, Stacey. And look, I start with communication with anyone, no matter who they are, what level they're at, is so important. So the skill of communication is important, and no matter what level of person you're talking to, I have a really strong belief in if we're kind, respectful, and build trust, we can develop some really good relationships. So, to answer your question more specifically, is there a difference in talking between a team lead and an executive? Yes and no. So, people are people, no matter what their job level, no matter what their title. And I think it's important to know who you're speaking with. So, how do they like to talk to you? What do they like to know? How do they like to take in information? Having an understanding of what the other person's way of working is can really be a great step in starting that communication and rapport building. So that can be done with no matter who you're dealing with. So, when we do then think about different hierarchies in an organization, there are some tips that can be helpful when you're dealing with senior leaders. And I made a note of a few of them. So, one, I say to my clients, be mindful that senior leaders are looking at things from a strategic and big picture perspective. They don't necessarily want to get into nitty gritty with you, all the little operational tactics. They are interested in the greater good or bigger goals rather than maybe some of the tasks. Now, I say this broadly. It's not every senior leader that looks at things this way, but to give people some perspective, they do like information, facts, figures, data, percentage of profit, those kind of things can be important to them. They like to hear about solutions to problems. They might want to hear about some problems, but they want to know about what solutions ideas do you have? What are some inspiring ideas that you can bring to the table? I also find that it's helpful to use concise and clear language. So careful if you're a talker like I am. You've got to be careful of rambling and over talking. Get to the point. Be careful of taking too long. If you're asking them questions, be mindful that it doesn't sound like an interrogation. And talking about time, they, especially the higher you go, the lonelier it is. Many CEOs have told me that there's less people to turn to, less people to cry on a shoulder with. So it is lonely for them, but they are so busy. They've got a million things to be thinking of, stuff we don't know about. So I say also be mindful of their time. If you want to set a meeting, make it nice and short. If you're catching them in the hallway, try to keep it crisp so that then they can move on to their next thing. Something else I find that's important is to have and show confidence. So even if you're that, the picture of the duck or the goose who's so smooth on the surface in the water, but their feet are going like that underneath, even if that's how you're feeling, it's important to be confident and show that, because they are trusting for your certainty in the knowledge or the information or the data that they're sharing. Another key thing I say is when you're speaking with senior leaders and you want to share things, share impact with them versus sharing to try to impress. And we've all been there and we've all seen it. And you see the people that come into a room and they put their shoulders back and they puff up their chests. And it's because they're trying to impress. But if you're coming from a place where you want to share the impact of your project or the impact of the knowledge you can give them, how you contribute to the goals of the organization or the strategy, then they're more inclined to listen. They like solutions to things, so that's the kind of approach they like. I think, as I said before, don't only give them problems. If there are some, sure, share. But what are some ideas that you have to mitigate those problems? I also say to people, Stacy and everyone, be ready for questions because they will ask you. They want to know stuff. So know your stuff and be confident. You know what you do. You know your job. You know your ability and you know your contributions. So, you're be at the ready because they're going to, want to know information from you. The last kind of tip I'll make at this point is what can be really helpful is start understanding the business goals if you don't know them already. What's the big picture of the company? What's their profit margin like? Where do they sit in the market? Where are they trying to go? And if you can start thinking from that perspective, that will help you in building engagement and rapport with those senior leaders. I'll take a breath, Stacy.
Thank you, Kathy. Some really great tips. And you did have a question that you wanted to pose to the audience. So get ready, everyone, to have a
Yeah.
think and be ready to write in our Q&A box.
Yeah. So I'd love your input, everyone. I'm very big on building awareness, and this is one of those pieces. So if you'd be willing to share, let me pose the question. I'll give you one of my examples because that might just help set you up. And anything you say is fine. There's no judgment here. So my question for you is, for you, what are your particular challenges or worries, maybe hesitations, fears in dealing with higher level leaders? What might that look like for you? And I'll share you mine. So I've always been fairly confident, and I got that skill growing up with a very confident father. But I always, for a very long time, found it intimidating to be in a room with higher level leaders. And whether I would be one-on-one with them or in a meeting or presenting, it really was scary for me. I went, wow, look at all these people that know so much. I don't know as much as they do. What if they ask me something? What am I going to say to them? And So, what happened to me one day a few years back is I was literally stuck in an elevator with the CEO of the company that I was working for. Never met him. And it was just me and him. And you could stand there and freeze and do nothing, wait for them to speak. I caught my breath and I said, "Hello, Jack. It's nice to see you here in Brisbane. We haven't met, but I'm Kathy and I'm part of your organizational development team. And one of the things that I work on here is leadership." And that got our conversation going until it was time for one of us to leave the elevator. And then you know what happened? The next time there was a social event at work and he was there, he actually saw me and he came up to me and he said, "Kathy," he remembered my name.
Wow.
Yeah. And he said, "Kathy, hey, how's that leadership project that you're working on going? I'd love to hear more." So you start building rapport, you start building some engagement. So the next time I did have to present something to him, I felt more comfortable. And I went, "You know what? He's just a guy, he's just a man and a person." So, audience, here's your question again. Write in the chat for us. What might be something that's a fear or a worry or a hesitation challenge for you in dealing with senior level leaders? And if you type that in the chat, we'll keep a lookout.
Thank you, Kathy. And so you can find the Q&A on the bottom ribbon of your panel there. So feel free to take some time to write your questions and your thoughts, and we can come back to those. And Kathy, I just wanted to make a comment about how beautifully concise your introduction was to the CEO in, just saying who you were and what you did as an opening statement. And I think it's a really great start in that way.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And he was a nice man. Like I didn't have to have any fear around it.
Mm.
I'm kind of lucky because my accent fools people. That's a really good starting place for people. And right away he said to me, "Hey, where was your homeland?" And
Mm.
that's a nice warm up. But then we
Mm.
got to work related stuff. So, you
Mm.
know, they have the capacity to talk to you, of course. We just sometimes need to own it.
So, Kathy, we do have a couple of examples that are coming in. I'll start
Oh,
with the
great.
first one, and thank you so much for our guests and attendees for taking the time to write in our Q&A box. It just makes our session much more interactive. So, our first one um, says, "I'm working in safety, and I have a lot of what ifs. If I want to enact something that is more proactive, it's hard to provide the data that management craves to prove the outcomes."
Yeah.
Over to you, Kathy. That's a tricky one.
That is a tricky one. And Stacy, forgive me, I actually can't see the chats. I'm just letting you know they're not popping up on my screen.
No
So I'll
problem.
be guided by you. Thank
Yes.
you. Um, Read it out to me one more time, Stacy.
So, just around working in safety and having a lot of what ifs,
Yeah.
they want to enact something that's more proactive. And I'm guessing rather than reactive, it's hard to provide the data that management craves to prove the outcomes.
Yeah. So, and it is such a tough one. And on those kind of ones, I try to do some research. So, if I don't have data, maybe in my organization, for example, I might seek out other organizations that might be like you. Can you find anything? I'm sure there's online reports and stuff like that where you've seen that maybe you've got a safety idea. For example, maybe you've got a really great safety idea that you want to implement. Where can you see that maybe that's done elsewhere, where it's caused improvement, where it's given things a better outcome, that you can take to the table with you as a backup. The other, if you don't have that, sometimes it's doing a projection This is what we believe based on what is happening now, implementing this such and such a safety measure. This is what we believe we're going to see a difference in. And again, the senior leaders still would like to know some facts and figures. So you can be broad. You can say things like, we would guess that we're going to have less accidents on site based on this. That would mean less costing because people will still be at work instead of home on sick leave. We would estimate that these things, we don't have to recruit consultants in to fill jobs because people are off sick. So things like that. Sometimes it's projection that then they can see a visual of how it can benefit.
Thank you, Kathy. And I do see too sometimes the option of trialing a pilot rather than going fully in to doing
Yeah,
a big project or a big change, just trialing it in a small part of the business and then gathering the evidence that it's made an impact.
good one too.
We've got
Yeah.
two other comments here that I'd like to go through. The next one is my challenge is to be concise, but fear leaving out critical detail and end up being too
Ah,
long-winded with detail and legalistic jargon.
yeah. Beautiful. I used to work in the legal world, so I do understand that as well. Um, this is just a joke. Sometimes you can write on your sleeve and hide keynotes on your arm, but maybe not. Used to do that in the old days. I used to do that in the old days for tips. What I find really helps, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later as well, but what I find really helps is being clear on what you want to cover and pick some key things. So if you've got a mass of stuff that you wish you could share with them, pick a few key things. So make those your highlights, because then you talk around each one and maybe, what it is, what the benefit, next one, next one. And I find that if you then highlight just a few things, not too many, it keeps it easier for you to keep contained. The other thing I say to people, so it's whether you're presenting or one-on-one, if you're going forward with something like that, practice out loud. And I know it sounds funny, but you either go to the mirror or you go to your puppy dog or you go to the tree in the backyard, your partner, whatever, a colleague, and you say what you want to say to that person out loud to them. Because once you hear it, you start realizing some of the words that fit and don't fit. And if you do it a couple of times over, you then get your quality and clarity that makes it more succinct. Stacy, would you add anything?
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that, Kathy. Yeah, practicing is absolutely critical, isn't it? Because you do learn what works and what doesn't very quickly. And it also gives you confidence that you have
Yes.
practiced and put in the work, and then you're more ready to kind of relay your points. Let's
Yep.
just go to one more example, Kathy, and then we'll get
Okay.
back into our podcast style webinar.
Great.
Um, as a consultant, I work across a number of industries. I worry that I might not have enough industry knowledge to carry out a meaningful conversation. This is a good one for you, Kathy, because you're also a
Yeah,
consultant.
it's great. And and I totally hear you, because even though I've worked in quite a few industries, I definitely walk into ones that I don't know anything about. So I do prepare, and that will come up later in our conversation as well. I do prepare. So I will go do some Google hunting. What is that organization? What are they about? What is that industry about? What do they do here in Queensland or whatever? So do some research. And then as a consultant, I go in with curious questions. So as they're talking to me, I just ask, what does that look like for you? How does that work here in your organization? What might help you? So I ask really open, curious questions, because as a consultant, as anybody, we don't know everything about everything. but we do have expertise. So I find if I ask, I find out more, and then we have discussions around that and how I can help.
Great, thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
Kathy, you mentioned earlier to me some points, some key points
Yeah.
when considering our interactions with senior leaders. Can you share these with our audience?
Yeah, let me. And look, and I also want to say, Stacy, thank you to those of you who put some comments in, and I hope some of those answers are helpful and some more along the way. So thank you. Um, Stacy, there are so many tips. We could talk all afternoon. There are three that I want to share that I find really helpful, that if you just go and kind of, Google a YouTube talk on this, you might not necessarily find these tips, which is why they were important for me to share. So the first one is when dealing with people, again, any level, senior leaders, middle, people that report to you, your colleagues, your family. It's around awareness. And so that's for others and that is for self. And many of you may have heard of the popular term, emotional intelligence. That's emotional intelligence. So if we think about others, am I understanding them? How am I building rapport? How can I build empathy and trust when I'm communicating with them? What is their style? And we talked a little bit about that earlier. How do they speak? How do they ask questions? What do they ask? How do they like to receive information and take in information? And that's being aware of what your audience or person is. So I do this in a various ways, sometimes by stealth. So I like to observe people in whatever circumstances I can to get a gist of what I notice. I will ask others about them. So if I'm, not familiar with a senior leader, I might ask my leader what they know about them and how they like to operate. I might go have a chat with their assistant. I might speak to other people who I know have engaged with them to get an understanding of how they like to work. Sometimes I even ask them. So if I know I have to say go and present a project to a senior leadership team, I might try to get a gist for some of them. What would be the best way for me to deliver this information to you? And what do you really want to know? And then you're more prepared and you're more ready. So a key with this one is you need to be able to adapt and flex to how others are as well. It's not just about you. What do they need as well? So if you're the over talker, but they're not, how can you meet them where they're at? Stacy, I know one of the things that we talked about even weeks ago
Mm.
was the importance of cues.
Yes.
So another way to help you with this research gathering is to be mindful of verbal and nonverbal cues. So things like facial expressions, what are they showing? Are they showing boredom? Are they showing impatience, maybe excitement? I've got to tell you, I was coaching a young man a few months ago, and he had already presented his project to the executive team at his organization. And when we met for our coaching session, he said to me, Kathy, I failed miserably.
Oh, no.
I'm not laughing at him. I felt for him. And so we talked it through. And I said, tell me more about the experience. I said, what did you see in the people around you? And he said, they looked disinterested. They looked disengaged. They were looking out the window. And I said, did you do anything differently? And he said, Kathy, I was so nervous. He said, I just rambled and rambled and rambled. And he said, that's why I feel like I was a failure. So we talked about what he could do next time. But my point is around what are you observing at the moment that you might need to then switch? If they are not with you, what might you need to change in your speak or information? Maybe ask a question. Where's their eye contact? Are they looking at their phones? Are they looking at you? What might that indicate? What is their posture showing you? Is it showing you disinterest? Is it showing you interest? Are they nodding, shaking their heads? What might that indicate to you? That they're paying attention, that they're interested? What questions are they asking? Are they being curious? Do they want more information? What can you help then guide them to that? One thing I like to be mindful of is if they're asking you things or saying things to you, are they repeating any words or ideas over and over? Because that might indicate that something is very important to them. And that might be a good place for you to circle back to. Or are they emphasizing a word strongly that you've noticed? You go, that might be important. I might need to make sure I highlight that when I'm talking to them. The other one is tone of voice. Are they angry, excited? What's going on for them that can just give you an indication of how you might need to adapt when you're talking to them? Now, the part 2 of this one, Stacy and everyone, is awareness of yourself. So how are you handling your own emotions? How do you take criticism? Are you able to take feedback with courage? So I know it's hard to get critical feedback, especially when you've worked hard on something, you're passionate about it. But can you take it in a professional way? Are you able to keep your composure, your balance, even though it might be a difficult one? Know yourself. So, one of the listeners had talked about, maybe they talk too much, which I know can be a fault of mine. And so, it's being aware. So if I'm a detail oriented person and I like to share everything with you, but Stacy, maybe you're not. Maybe you just like high level information. I need to come to the table, to that interaction, mindful of that. So don't give Stacy too much detail. She doesn't need it, doesn't want it. What are my key points for Stacy? So knowing yourself is important, knowing what the other person needs. So audience, here's a question for you. And again, I love to give an example of my own. So the question is, what is something that you notice about yourself in your interactions with people? So here's mine. I love people. I love seeing people grow and develop and thrive. And I like to know a person. So I like to find out, what's their family like? Do they have pets? What do they do in their spare time? What's their favorite ice cream? Because I love ice cream. But I have to appreciate that not everybody is like that. Not everybody wants to share that with me. So if I know it, learn that, understand that, then if the other person is like, hey, how are ya? And they want to get right to the point of the project or the timelines or whatever, then I am mindful and that's what I do. Again, it's just being understanding of meeting them where they're at. So audience, would you mind, just for a share, we don't have to talk too much about it, but would you mind sharing? Is there something that you notice about yourself when you interact with others that comes up for you that you'd like to share with us?
Great. And so you know where to find the Q&A. We've already got our great comments from earlier, so feel free to pop in your sharing there. I've got a similar one, Kathy, while our lovely audience are taking some time to write their comments. It's very similar to yours. I do like to get to know people on a personal level. And in a previous job, I was, initially divulging a little bit of information about myself, I suppose, in that vulnerable space, and
Yeah.
just noticed that the person wasn't reciprocating that and clearly was uncomfortable with
Mm,
divulging personal information themselves. And so then I learnt that our dialogue was not to be around that. It was
yeah.
meant to be all work. And I was happy to adapt
Yeah.
to that situation. So that's kind of mine as well. And it's looking for those
Yeah.
cues, isn't it?
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. So that way I keep calling it, you're meeting people where they're at. And look, and I believe, you know, you do need to go negotiate those
Yeah.
relationships. Like, yes, you adapt to them, but you hope that they adapt to you a little bit as well.
Mm.
If they don't, it's still the awareness that you have. And that's kind of the gold in this. They might have not have that awareness, but you do.
Yeah, lovely. That's a nice way of looking at it. We don't have anyone who's written any comments in
Okay.
relation to this, so feel free
Okay.
to, and we will definitely come back to them. But let's move on to your tip two. I know you want to talk
Yeah.
about intent.
Yes. So, short and sweet on this one. When you're going to have a conversation, a meeting, or proposing information, whatever it is, what I say is be clear on your intent. So know what you are trying to do and share with them. Is your intent to provide them with information? Is your intent to help them understand something you're working on? Is your intent to show them the success of your project and how it saved the organization money? Is your intent to help solve some problems and maybe get input from others to mitigate those challenges? Is your intent to get input on a process that you're trying to work through? So what is the intent and purpose of your conversation? And it could be a few things. It might not just be one thing. It could be a few things. But I say that it's important to know this because, again, when you know what it is, then you know what you want to cover. It keeps you on track and you deliver the information more concisely, succinctly, and with confidence. So the simple of tip two. Tip three.
Can I just take a pause because we do have
Yes.
someone, if we can
Oh,
just circle back to
great.
the sharing, and then we'll
Great.
move on to tip three.
Super.
So, and this is a really, really good one.
Yeah.
And it's thinking more about what I'm going to say next rather than focus on what the person is saying in that moment.
Yes.
Such a good one. We all do it,
Yeah. And that's
especially
our,
when we're nervous around senior leaders.
yes. And that's our listening skills, which I know we're coming to as well, Stacy.
Mm.
Um, and look, we all, as you said, Stacy, we all do it. It's a very hard skill to kind of get control over. What I say to people is do your best to be centered and calm. And in that moment, your focus is on the other person. It's about them. It's not about the question you want to ask just yet. It is about them. What are they saying? And it's okay if they've finished. It's okay to take a pause before you ask your next question. I think we all get in this pattern of, oh, they've stopped talking. There's space. I need to fill it. you know, we all,
Mm.
and that's part of our nerves. But if we just listen, take it in, pause, then ask the question, that's okay to do. And it shows you're listening.
I love that, Kathy. And I think too, just focusing on the other person and listening and trusting yourself that the right question will emerge.
Yes,
You don't need to have it ready. It will come
that's right.
at the right time. So just trust yourself that if you listen to the person, the right question will come.
Yeah, exactly. Good, Stacy. Yep, perfect.
Okay. So tip three, you were going
Tip
to.
three. I call it the why. It's the why tip. So, again, in whatever interaction you're having, whether you're sending an email, whether you're in a meeting with a group, whether you're in a one on one conversation, whether you're just casually stopping by someone's desk to have a chat, what is the why of the conversation with that person. So, what's the purpose of your interaction? And be clear at the start. So, I'll give you a few examples. So, in a meeting, you might say to everyone, hello, everyone. Today, we're here to discuss the XYZ project. I'm going to share its successes and challenges with you. They understand why you're there. Or you might be presenting some information. So you're saying, hey, everyone, I'm presenting information on our new system. We've seen some benefits already, and I want to tell you the next steps for rollout. So why are you there talking to them?
Mm.
Maybe in an email, you're wanting to connect with someone for a meeting. So I say, hey, I'd like us to schedule a one-on-one because I want to let you know about the work plan that my team has. And I want to share with you some of the information that I've got and get your permission on a next step forward. So people then know what it is they're talking to you about, and it gets them in a place ready to respond, ready to consider. If you're stopping by at somebody's desk, hey, you want to go for a coffee? I'd love to talk to you about our project. It just gives people placement. The other thing I really like about the why is when you're asking people to do things or support you in something or engage with you in something, when you tell them the why around it, I find that people are more willing to follow you, stand by you. So if I give you an example, and it was from a young lady I was coaching not long ago, and she worked in a law firm, and she was struggling with meeting some of the requirements from her partner there, her leader. And what we uncovered was they didn't explain the why to her. So, for example, they might say, Stacy, I need you to get that document to me by the end of the day today. And that would be it. But instead, if they said something like, Stacy, I need you to get that document to me by the end of the day today because I need to have it in the client's hands at 9 o'clock in the morning for the meeting with the other client. And then they go, oh, now I know why I need to rush. Now I need to know why I need to prioritize it. Or if I can't, we can have a conversation around it. So I say, share your why up front and share the reasons why in conversation. So again, people have clarity.
Great, thank you. And
Mm.
that's kind of an example of upwards feedback, is it not? If she was to say to her partner, I'd really appreciate if you could add this extra step. It really helps me in the meeting and kind of motivating me to do the task on time.
Yes, it is and it's funny that you say that because that's what our coaching helped build her confidence to do, because she worked for two different partners, and we worked out that the one that gave her the whys gave her more inspiration. She was more willing, where the one who didn't was where she was falling behind in her tasks. So when she had that conversation with the other one, things changed, that dynamic changed.
How interesting. And just an FYI for everyone listening, we do have a webinar coming up on that in September about upward feedback. So,
There you go.
all right, Kathy, we were going to
Yes.
pause here, I believe, and just see if there were any comments.
Yeah, if anybody had any questions or anything at this stage before we
No
keep
additional
going.
comments yet, but I am monitoring that chat box. So feel free to pop your comments and thoughts down as we go. So happy for you to move on to your next point if you like, Kathy.
Yeah,
You've
sure.
offered some really great tips so far, and that was just a really great tip for people with upward feedback, but also if you're a leader yourself, that you could just give that extra piece of information to
Yeah.
people reporting into you.
Yep.
What else is helpful for us to know about when communicating upwards, whether you have a strategic idea that you'd like to share,
Yep.
or if you need to deliver information on a project, or yeah.
Yeah. So I've got quite a few things. I'm mindful of the time, Stacy. So everyone, I might speed talk a little bit to cover a few things, but do put a question in if we can help you. So Preparation is key. If it's not just a off the cuff thing,
Yeah.
preparation. So we talked about being clear with your intent and what's the why. Adapting your communication style for the audience. Be ready for that. So that's around your awareness and showing your confidence. Some of the other things that can be helpful in being prepared are, we talked about focusing on impact. So, what is the impact that you're trying to deliver? Not about impressing. Having your facts and data at the ready to support your points and give some examples if necessary is good. Anticipate questions. You'll never know what somebody's going to ask, but sometimes we can kind of have a guess based on the topic. And if you have that at the ready, that can make a smoother answer for you. Know what their priorities are if you can, so you can tailor your messages to align with what their goals and priorities are. I say be professional, so polite, courteous. If they dismiss an idea or disagree with the concept, I know that hurts. I know that can be an ouch, but I still say, hold your head up high. It's okay. Listen actively, and we talked a bit about listening. So that's that paying attention, showing you're engaged and interest. Respond thoughtfully, reflect on what they've said, and trust that you'll have an answer. Be curious. The other thing I say, as I said before, is be confident, and we call it having presence. So, it's in your demeanor, in your stance, it's in your poise and your balance. And that confidence is also in what you know. So you know your jobs, you do have capability, you have ability, know that you have that. So believe in yourself and the good work that you do and what you know. Being strong and controlled in convictions, not argumentative, but you can debate your point. It's not about being annoyed if they disagree, but what might you say that could show them a different side of things. Really important, this one. Get feedback. And I say this to people all along in your careers. Seek feedback, whether it's from your colleagues, your reports, the leaders that you have above you. And the questions I ask are, what am I doing well? And is there anything I can do better or anything I can do differently? And if you are open to that, oh my gosh, the richness of the learning and growth you can get is amazing. Be resilient, because things in work and life aren't easy. And we do come across roadblocks with things. So even if your proposal isn't considered, or, an idea, they've just not liked it or gone with it. And I know how disappointing that is. I still say keep centered around it. You may or may not know what their decision is, but you need to kind of, take it on board that they are making the decision that they need to make in that time. So yeah, I do find that if you're strong in being ready for the good and the difficulties, you will still learn from those in order for your next steps.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. I'm going to head straight into the question around promotion, and I'll ask that in a
Okay.
second. But I just
Yeah.
want to signal to our attendees today that we do have about 5 minutes until we get to our Q&A session. We're going to leave about 5 minutes at the end so we can Kathy can answer any questions that you have. So start popping them in the chat box if we haven't covered anything that you're hoping to get out of the webinar today. So Kathy, let's talk about promotion.
Okay.
How do you
Yeah.
show yourself if you'd like to be ready for a promotion?
Yeah, that's a great one. So it is something that's really handy to plan for. And the biggest tip I give people is find yourself a mentor and another and a few, and they don't have to be all at once. But I recommend to people, wherever you are, your level, seek a mentor that's maybe 1 to 2 steps ahead of you. If you want to be a CEO, great. But if you're a team leader at the moment, maybe a mentor and a CEO is a bit far reaching because you still need to take some further steps along your career journey. So I say try to pick a mentor. They don't have to be in your organization. Maybe if you know someone, they're great. They can be someone outside as well. But talk to them about how did they get to where they're at? What were their learnings along the way? If they had their time over, what do they wish they knew earlier on in their careers? Some of those rich answers can help you guide you on your way forward. Um, I say demonstrate your value as well. We talked about you guys know your stuff. So deliver high quality work. If you can, take on some additional responsibilities or put your hand up for things. Communicate your aspirations with your leader so they know the path that you want to take because they might help keep an eye out for you for that path. It's nice to have advocates, what I call a cheer squad to help you on that journey. Build strong relationships as you go. Even if you're the quiet type that would rather stand back, and just listen, and that's okay.
Mm.
But on this journey, it's still important to build relationships. So network, go to some industry events if you can, go to meetings where you can, pay attention to senior leaders and what they do. Um, Gain respect. So, in your work and dealing with people, so keep your promises. That will highlight that you're willing to work hard and share what you know, share your ideas and insights. I've done that before. Sometimes they register with people, sometimes they don't, but at least you're coming to the table with some thoughts.
Such great
Um,
key points,
yeah,
Kathy. I
yeah,
love the one about actually being explicit that you're ready for the next step because
yeah,
sometimes we forget to verbalize that and to let people know that we're looking for that promotion. I mean, that's a really simple one that sometimes we forget.
yes,
Really brilliant. With the mentoring, don't be afraid to ask people to be your mentor as well,
yeah,
because often I hear from senior leaders that they're delighted because it is
yes.
lonely at the top and they're delighted to be able to share their experience and their skills with you. So that's
That's,
a
yep.
lovely point.
And I've also come across people who go, "Oh, I'm afraid they're so busy already. I don't want to, add more to their." But I say, what's the worst that can happen?
They say
You
no.
ask, they say no. And that's it. There's no harm done, you
Mm.
know. And then you move on and find someone else. And for whatever reason, maybe that's okay that it's a no at that stage. But maybe because you've asked, maybe 6 months from now, when they have more time or something, they might circle back to you. You never know. So it doesn't hurt to ask.
And I love that you put the points side by side about building networks and relationships and having a mentor, coupled with showing that you can do the work, and
Yeah.
you've talked about some great tips to communicate that
Yeah.
to upper management. So that there's two prongs really out there because you've got to know your stuff and be doing good stuff,
Yeah.
but you've also got to know how to communicate that.
Yeah. There's one thing that I want to share. There's so many things I want to share with everyone. I'm trying to think which one. But there's one thing around leadership, which is you can be a leader from wherever you sit in an organization or in your life. And that I'm so passionate about. You don't just have to be a manager with a title. You don't have to lead people in a team or a project to be a leader. You can be a leader wherever you are. And that is about engaging and speaking up and putting your hand forward and be willing to try something and do something, willing to speak up about something. So don't be afraid to show that, because that is also a great sign when you want to go through for promotion. If people around you are seeing that in you from no matter where you sit, they'll keep one eye open as they watch you on your journey. So personal leader, you can lead from wherever you sit.
Thank you, Kathy. And that's a really great point. And Kathy, I'm going to start to get you to think about the closing points that you'd like to make while we just take a breath and we check our Q&A to see if there's any final questions now that we have a few minutes to go.
Great.
I'll pop into the question functions. We don't have any questions at this point. So let's start to do our close up.
Okay.
Don't worry, everyone. If you have a question, I will jump back in here one more time to check before we say goodbye.
Okay. Stacey, I was just realizing we didn't get to cover some of the great listening skill things. So maybe we need another webinar on listening skills, just on listening skills. Where to start? So let me share something with you as a takeaway task, everyone. So I know you're probably like, oh my gosh, I don't want any homework. But this is such a good thing. So reflective practice, maybe you've heard of it, is about self-reflection. And it is a way to do your own learning and growth on a permanent basis. And it is a tactic they are now sharing even in MBA programs, because they can see what difference it makes for people. And I think if people can do that all the way along in their lives and careers, all the personal learning and growth we can have from that is substantial. So people, here's your homework task. It's important, if you can, to make it a habit.
Yep.
And it only can take a minute or two in a day. And let me tell you what I do. So at the end of my day, I have a look at my day and I think about the things, the meetings or the clients or the report I was writing or whatever. And I go, what is one thing I did really well today? And even if it was your hardest day at work and it was just crazy,
Yeah.
I want you to go, what is the one thing I did well today? And that might be something like, you know what? When the client yelled at me, I remained calm and composed and I didn't, scream or cry, something around what I did well. And I want you to think of that first.
Mm.
And then the next thing I want people to do is go from my day, what is one thing I could improve upon or maybe do differently if I had my time again? So maybe it's, I was in a conversation with Stacey and I realized that I probably interrupted her a few too many times and I really didn't give her a chance to share with me what she wanted. So tomorrow I'm going to circle back around to her and check in if she shared everything she wanted. Now, I do it that way. I just do it in my head and I take on that learning and then I try to action what I want to improve. You might be the person that likes to journalize that and write it down, and that's great. You might be the person that likes to verbalize it. So maybe share it with your mentor or a colleague or a friend or family member. But it only takes a couple of minutes a day to form a habit, which will really improve all aspects of your being, of how you can grow as a person and grow as a leader.
That's an amazing final tip, Kathy. Thank you. As there are no further questions, I am going to wrap up today's webinar. I want to say thank you for everyone for joining us today and also registering. After the webinar, you are going to get a copy of the recording of the webinar today. If you would like a certificate of attendance to show evidence that you've participated in this PD, just get in contact with us at support@mitraining.edu.au. I want to share with you that our next webinar is on developing a growth mindset, strategies for upward mobility. And it's also next Thursday at 12 p.m. All the details can be found on our website, and I hope to see you next week. Thanks, everyone. And thank you so much, Kathy, for your wise
Thank
words.
you. Bye, everyone. All the best for the rest of the day. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Bye for now.